My name is Erin Sauter. I'm one of the other co-founders of From Day One, and I just wanted to echo my partners in saying just how grateful I am that all of you are here. I'm getting a little emotional, and it was almost surreal seeing all of you check in, and the fact that all of you are here so dedicated to employee engagement and to putting your people first and joining us today. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope everybody has enjoyed the session so far. And next, I'd like to introduce our second panel for today. It's entitled, How to Make Reskilling Part of a Corporate Culture of Learning. Employers who make reskilling a continuous part of their culture can cost effectively develop the talent they need, as well as enhance their employer brand. I can take this off for a second, I think. Today, we're going to dive into an effective new educational techniques and how to cultivate an emphasis on active learning. So as moderator, we'd like to reintroduce and welcome back the esteemed Seattle TV journalist, Enrique Serna. Please help us in welcoming Enrique and our other esteemed panelists. Welcome, Enrique and panelists.
Good afternoon, everybody. Are you awake? Yeah. I don't know, that sounded kind of so-so. Really, I just say, you're really awake. Well, thank you very much for joining us or rejoining us here for this afternoon session as we take on the topic of reskilling and how it is part of corporate culture and the learning of employees and employers. And we have a great panel here with us to talk about this issue. And I'm going to start to my far right, and that's with Karen, to go ahead and introduce yourself, name, rank, serial number of each one of you, and introduce yourself to the crowd here.
Okay, great. So I'm Karen Kocher. I'm with Microsoft, and I lead talent and learning experiences and the workforce and workplace of the future.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Griffiths. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hone. We're a leading platform for live cohort learning at scale inside the enterprise, manager training, leadership training, and DEI.
Samreen Aslam, Director of Learning at AMP Creative. We are the cool people out there with the booth and the AR, VR headsets. We do digital learning and digital technology in the creative services learning and development space, as well as obviously XR. And so excited to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Sonia Vora. I'm the Director of Talent and Organizational Effectiveness at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation right here in Seattle, and really pleased to be here as well. Thank you.
Now, be truthful. Are you really here for us, or is it for that real quick rapid test outside? I'm actually going to do that as soon as we get done here, but I appreciate that fact. All right, let's get started. So we're hearing a lot these days about the need for teaching our workforce new skills. And let's start with this. Just why is that so urgent right now, and why is it important? We start right here. Go ahead.
You know, working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I've been there for 2 years. It's really different from a lot of organizations I've worked in, as we tend to hire extreme experts in their field. But when we talk about the environment that we've been in for the last 2 years, externally, of course, with COVID, internally, everyone knows that we've had our own changes with the announcement of the divorce, with new trustees coming in, with our own focus on what we mean by DE&I and how that plays on a global stage. It has really challenged the organization in a way that it's different from being technical experts in things like malaria and polio and women's health and US education. It's about understanding that the assets of the foundation, of course, is money, of course, is voice, but at the end of the day, it's people. And people are complicated, and so this concept of a learning mindset is not unusual in an expert organization. They thrive on that. But applying that to how to work with people under stress, with massive changes that are being driven internally and externally, and what that means in terms of leadership, in terms of engagement, in terms of retention, things that we might have taken for granted 2 years that we no longer can.
So one thing I wanted to follow up here is that so the people that you tend to go out and discover, because I find that interesting, talent in this case, but we're talking about some major brains out there. So in working with them, are you working to also how they interact with people, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some colleagues here who know firsthand, as we think about talent acquisition, what it means to attract and source the level of elite talent of, 25 years in vaccine development for malaria in a specific region in Africa. There's no one better in the world for that. They're scientists. I mean, they're scientists who are running massive labs and massive budgets, and then they come into the foundation and they're running massive teams. And they're working with a lot of grantees, which is a people relationship as well, obviously, and consultants and vendors. And suddenly you start talking about, well, what's your value proposition to your employees, and what is your retention strategy, and how are you managing performance and setting goals? And it's like, am I the one who's supposed to be doing that? Like, that's what people leadership means. And I don't mean that in just the normal way that we think about, and there's a million books about. It's about changing a mindset to say, that is not something that you do that is separate from the impact you're trying to create in the world. It's the direct path to it. And forming that link, while it seems natural, is not as natural if that's not the environment that you've grown up in. Right. So developing that learning mindset and that link between this work and the impact you want to make around the world is a very critical focus for us right now.
Right. Samreen, can you?
I just want to add, I think the reason upskilling or reskilling or learning is so urgent today, well, the obvious answer is because of change, right? There's constant change happening in the workforce. But above and beyond that, I think it's that we are living today in a knowledge society. We live in a society that the currency is knowledge, right? And the more knowledge you have, the stronger you are, the more powerful you are, the more opportunities you have to learn and develop yourself. And that is the pathway to progression in the workforce. Whether you're looking for the next promotion, whether you're looking to pivot industries entirely, or whether your organization decides to completely pivot in a new direction, which is happening more often than not in today's post-COVID world. So I think it's just the currency. The ability to learn today is the most powerful skill set you can have as a working professional in the corporate world, at least, but not just in corporate America. I think all over, wherever you are. And the ability to pivot not only, I think, means that you have an agile mindset, which it definitely does. It definitely means you have learning agility and the ability to pivot from one skill set to another. But it also means to add layers and skill sets to you. So it's not just shifting from a role to another role. I mean, I started as a journalist way back when I finished my undergraduate degree, and had to pivot into a learning world when I decided to move into consultancy. And that was just an extreme pivot, right, in a different direction. But today it is what is, I think many of you L&D professionals would know as the M curve versus the T curve, right, or the M structure versus the T structure. And that is, we used to have breadth of knowledge in all of these arenas and depth of knowledge in one sphere of influence. And today it is, you have to have depth and breadth of knowledge in various spheres of influence to be really powerful and successful. And I think that's where the trend is going. Eventually, I think that M will become this wavelength that on goes. But it's just the more disciplines you know and the more disciplines you see yourself as an expert in, the stronger and more powerful you are in your work. And not just about power, but also about influence, right? Also about ability to make change in the world, ability to make positive change for the people that we serve in our industries.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if we're supposed to go in order, so I'm just going to add something.
Jump right in, Karen.
Sure. Right back but just to build off something that was just said, I mean, I think that Microsoft did a body of research back in 2019/2020, and it was all about hybridizing skills, right? And so I think the point was a particularly good one. It used to be, right, historically, people focused on their area of expertise, right? Whatever that may be. Like I'm a general manager, or I'm a sales leader, or I'm a marketing professional. But a lot of what the focus is at this point in time are those skills that you need regardless of what your area of specialty is. So think digital literacy, right, and data acumen and customer service, right? It used to be that the only people that we all thought really needed to pay attention to customer service were people in the front line of customer service. But these days, every organization wants highly customer-centered employees, right? And so all of those skills become and we call them the hybridizing skills, right? Where you have to pay attention to, of course, your area of expertise. You need to be a great marketing leader, but at the same time, you also have to have data literacy, you have to have digital acumen, you have to have this customer-centric mindset and attitude. And so those 5 hybridizing skills really do become quite essential, which means all of us have to be learning all the time, not just people that are looking for new jobs. So.
Tom.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree with all of that. Learning's essential for. So what they said. No, I guess one thing to add would be the macro picture. If you look at how tight the labor market is right now, 3% of people are leaving a job every month. So if you do the math times 12, that's over a third of people changing jobs this year. So as an employer, and we work with hundreds of different employers, we are an employer, obviously. It's brutal out there when it comes to talent acquisition, and so having a really robust, employee-centric learning culture is a differentiator when it comes to recruiting talent, particularly people younger in their career. Millennials and Gen Z will tell you there's 2 things more important to them than the salary. It's the mission of the company and its opportunities for growth and development. And so if an employer can really excel in that area and show how joining this company for the long term will really help your career long term, then you can attract and retain people in this hyper-competitive talent market.
So not everybody wants to reskill. There are people that, this is what I do and this is what I know, and I don't want to do that other stuff. So how do you nudge those folks, or what? What do you do?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at that. I think to me, learning happens between necessity and fear, right? So necessity is when we decide to learn, like I need to learn this for my job, or I have to learn this for the future. So when you really feel a need to learn something, I think that's when we actually acquire, because otherwise you'd walk away from your 2 weeks of onboarding training and remember exactly how to submit PTO and exactly how to add for disability leave and never have to look at it again. But we only learn it when we actually have to do it. But then fear is on the other end of that spectrum. I think fear kills the ability to learn, is like a learning killer. And I'm stealing that quote from Shelley Osborne, the fear is the learning killer. I think she talks about it, used to be the VP of Learning and Development at Udemy. But she talks about this concept of fear being a learning killer. And I think actual learning is somewhere between that. So motivation, I think, comes from within. But how do you get people who are almost kind of on this offset, like, I'm just going to do my job and plug away at this, and hopefully this will be enough and people will see I'm good at my job? Well, I think learning is not a side activity outside of your job anymore. I think learning is part of your job for everyone. And I think when we can talk about it that way, that part of my R&R that I'm measured on, that my manager is holding me accountable to, that their manager is holding them accountable to, is learning, is L&D. So L&D, I think at some point was, off on the side, sitting over here. But today, L&D has to sit in alignment with your business priorities. And so part of your R&R, regardless of which role you're in, is to learn, is to skill and to upskill and to reskill. And so these things then, when you feel like they're now not a side activity, but part of my role, then I think people automatically get motivated because it is that necessity, right? The necessity is the mother of learning concept. And so then people are like, oh, okay, I need to learn this. I mean, how are we all motivated to learn something? Why are we at this conference, right? I was having a conversation with someone at lunch and they're like, well, I'm hoping to walk away with nuggets that I can plug into my organization, that I can actually walk away with a good idea. Well, that's why we're here. We're here to be upskilled and reskilled and learn from one another. So I think we realize that we live in a knowledge society, and I think we realize that learning is part of our job today. It's not outside of. And that's L&D's job, I think, is to make that part and parcel of your business priority and part and parcel of people's development plans and review cycles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to weigh in there because totally agree. I think a really important forcing function is a level of accountability for people. We see in the work that we do maybe 20% of super keen learners, they'll just eat anything that you send to them and they're totally motivated. There's a middle 60% who will do what they're asked to do fine, but go back to work. And then there's a 20% at the end who really need to be reminded that this is so important for them. Right. And so having their supervisors or the performance review process in the company really holding them accountable for doing what we all know is in their best interests has been the forcing function that's worked to get 100% of people.
Absolutely, and it's that same concept of like, the motivation comes when you don't force a fish to climb a ladder, right? To quote, I think it was Dr. Seuss, but I'm sure someone else said it before then. But then people want to learn when it's aligned to their strengths, and they're like, oh, I've discovered this strength of mine because I took a course and realized that I'm a fantastic communicator, or I suck at communication, but I want to be a people manager, so maybe I should learn this skill, right? And that also, I think, helps people. When they know what their strengths are and what they want to focus on, then I'm excited to learn. I'm not being forced to learn. It's not part of my like R&R, but I actually I'm doing this because it's going to help me have more self-realization of my passions and my ikigai, I think is the Korean word, right? Which says, what is your vocation or your calling in life? And if I can find that through learning, heck yes, I want to do more and more of this, because that gives me that sense of purpose at my job. I'm not just coming to work to timestamp a card, but I'm coming to work because I'm passionate about what I do, and I have the space at my organization to grow into the area that I want to grow into.
Karen, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to add one thing based on what Tom said, it's we launched something about a year and a half ago, what was known as the skills moment, and we gave people around the world the opportunity to acquire new skills at no cost. And when we did a lot of the research before the skills moment, what we found loud and clear was that the reason why people don't proactively pursue new skills is because they don't know what skills are accelerating versus what skills are decelerating. Right? So if I'm every day doing my job as a nurse and my boss is telling me I'm doing a good job, and I probably am doing a good job, but if I don't realize that the skills that are accelerating to make me even a better nurse and a more highly paid nurse and a more employable nurse long-term are things like, say, digital savvy, then I don't pursue them. And it isn't because I'm not interested, it's not because I'm not a motivated person, it's because I don't know. And so people said, if I just knew what skills, and then secondly, once you know what skills, I need to know how to acquire the skills, right? And that's where the programming, the content, the whatever it is, right? Whatever the sources are of people being able to develop the skills in ways that are energizing for them. And then lastly, it's that last mile piece, right? I need to see that if I get those skills, that I actually get something because of it, right? I get more opportunity, even if that's a project, right? And so you have to, because if nothing's worse than somebody spending their discretionary effort to acquire skills, and then a year or two later, they're still sitting in the same job, making the same pay, they haven't had any new opportunities. And so those three things become really important, right? What are the skills? Prove to them, right? Give them some reason to be motivated to pursue new skills, show them what they are and why they're accelerating, and then show them how to get them, and then definitely connect them to opportunities where they get to apply and benefit from the acquisition of those skills. So that's what we learned. And I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's hard to put those three things together with people, right? And so I would just add that.
Yeah. Sonia, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say philosophically, or maybe biologically, humans love to learn, but we don't like to be taught. And so that is something that we have to wrestle with as educators in our organizations, while dealing with what are our strategic priorities, how do we scale solutions, how do we make them sort of accessible, what if it's not what somebody wants to learn. But at the end of the day, if we remember, we all love to learn. We want to, like as Samreen said, we're here. If we can break out of some old mindsets of like, obviously no one here thinks that learning happens in the classroom, but if there are ways for us to tap into what people already love to do, we have to do a lot less work. We just have to figure out what that is and push back against people who say, well, move faster, don't talk to as many people, don't do another survey of focus groups. That's the only way we're going to learn, is by going and doing that work up front. And then tapping into the innate energy that exists in every human being at every organization represented here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to tie it back to something I heard you say earlier, Sonia, which was about mindsets. Because so often you're focused on the kind of end product of the skill or the behavior, and that's obviously really important because it's observable and you can assess it, but you have to start with the mindset and finding a link, like you say, to someone's intrinsic motivation for why they should learn this. For a scientist, maybe it's, I can have an impact with my research, but if I can manage 20 researchers really effectively, I can have 20x the impact. And if you can make that mindset shift, I think it follows that everything else is easier.
That's right.
Seems like
I agree.
one of the big issues here is really communication skills. And along with that, the ability to not only talk, but to listen.
Yeah.
So how do you make that a part of what you're doing in reskilling somebody, and particularly for people that don't want to listen? You know, they want to talk.
I live with one of those.
Yeah. Go ahead. Anyway.
I think that I was sharing with some of my colleagues at lunch today that coming from a for-profit to a nonprofit was probably as big of a transition in my own mental model than it was going from individual contributor to manager, which I think is like one of those like career shifting moments that challenges everything that you think. Because we hire such experts in their field, because we have so much voice on what happens within the organization, in some cases in the world, listening is hard.
Yeah.
And we get that feedback from our own employees, from some of our partners, consultants, and grantees that the power is in closing our own mouths and opening our own ears. And we are using the power of storytelling to help convey that, whether it's through listening sessions, whether it's through highlighting stories on our intranet. We've now just announced a Bill Senior Award, our first sort of corporate award, which is the spirit of the foundation rests in the father of Bill Gates, William Gates Sr., to reinforce and to celebrate those that do exactly as you've shared, Enrique, is listen and truly connect with other people to unleash. When we talk about mindset, there is something infinite in every human being, and we're just shutting it down with like rules and processes and policies. If we can listen, we figure out what that is in the other person, you unlock that and miracles happen. So that's how we're trying to do it.
That's a brilliant point, I think. I think listening is so powerful. And I think one of the modes to teach soft skills, whether it's communication or anything else, or to have these mindset shifts, what we do at AMP Creative is we use AR/VR technology for some of this. Because soft skills are hard to learn. I mean, it's behavior change, right? And anybody who knows behavior change knows it's difficult. Otherwise, we'd always hit all of our goals that we set on New Year's Eve and be able to hit them all. So I think it's just human to like toughen up and try to make behavior change. But I think in order to give us space to listen, to have that kind of space to react before we respond, I think VR does a brilliant job of that, AR, VR, or just even immersive video, right? Even before you get into the headsets, but just immersive video, I think what it allows you to do is really empathize, really perspective take, really sit in the position of somebody else. And what is listening? I think listening is perspective taking. It's being able to understand what the other person is saying and then respond to that, really hear them, and then react to that and communicate. The skill of communication, I think, is simply just being able to take the perspective of somebody else and then respond in a clear way that makes sense to them. I would talk to my toddler very differently than I would to my adult husband, right? And so I think, hopefully. I think their ability to listen is probably the same, though.
But there might be some similarities there.
Yeah, there are similarities there. Men of either age don't know how to listen as well. But just joking, just kidding, just kidding. But I think it's just when you're able to sit and really meet eye to eye with the other person and hear them, I think as a people manager, as an individual contributor, as a leader of any organization, it is so critical just to sit and say, let me understand where you're coming from. So I think it's brilliant what Sonia said about listening, because if we as L&D professionals can't listen to our end users, then how do we build learning for them? I mean, how do we build learning solutions that are supposed to enable behavior change, enable learning, when we can't hear the end beneficiary? I mean, we hear this buzzword of human-centered design over and over again, but that's really what it's about. Whether you're a marketing professional, whether you're an L&D person, whether you're in HR and having a really tough review cycle with someone, it's really about understanding where that individual is coming from, putting ourselves in that position, and then responding from that place of empathy, from that place of perspective. It's a hard skill to learn. I think technology makes it easier. Scenario-based, simulated ways of learning soft skills, I think, make it easier. We really believe in the power of that simulation. I think when we can illustrate that either in AR, VR, immersive tech, or in just role plays in the ways that we've done it for many, many years, but really be able to simulate that, I think that's how people walk away with actually, oh, next time I'm going to catch myself before I say X, Y, Z, because I think maybe that's not the right way to say it.
Karen, did you want to?
Oh, the only thing I was going to add was that I do think that it's all about somebody and their performance, right? Most people, it's not talking to them about learning. Most people want to do something better. So whether they're good listeners or not good listeners, they're trying to get something accomplished every day. And if they see the reason why they should do it differently or better, they will do it differently or better. And so, not to use one of the classic like phrases that we seem to use a lot in learning, but in the flow of work, right? It's like if I need to better understand what my customer is dissatisfied with my product, then put me through a customer journey mapping session, right? As a team, show me what the pain points are with the customer so I can make it better. That is a learning experience. It's also a work outcome that is really relevant and valuable to people who are incented by and motivated to improve the customer experience. And so these are the kinds of things so I think we just, listen or not listen, we have to help the person understand why what it is they're about to engage in is a difference maker in their ability to be a high performer, which I haven't met many people that isn't their end objective on most days when they go to work, right? That's what they're looking for, so how to help them do that more easily and more integratedly. So,
I agree, Karen. Sorry, I just want to respond to that for 1 second. I agree, but I also think that in order to help them, you have to listen to their challenges to be able to respond and react and build for that person's needs. And I think that becomes the shift from corporate L&D types to like individualized custom solutioning, right? And actually helping people move and change.
Totally agree. My whole point is it's about their performance need.
Yeah.
They're learning. They don't know what their learning need is.
Right,
They don't know what their performance need is. So it's
for sure.
Tom, something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so, I mean, the importance of listening, it's the first skill that we teach in our manager bootcamp. And we aim by the end of the bootcamp to get the manager to be more like a coach. And before you can really coach people, you have to listen deeply. We call it 360 listening. One of the great stories that one of our instructors, who are all executive coaches, tells is when he was coaching a one-on-one client on the phone one day, he was out and about. She had a problem that she was dealing with, and he asked her like a deep, open-ended question about how she was going to solve this, and then went on mute because he was driving past some construction or something. And then she went on and she paused, and then he asked her the follow-up question about what she could do about it. How would she overcome this challenge? Listen for a few minutes, and then ask another question, and then by the third question, she'd figured out the solution to her problem and was ready to go back to the workplace, kind of all motivated. And then he looked at his phone and realized it was still on mute. So he hadn't asked any of those follow-up questions. She just worked it out for herself just because she felt like she was being listened to. And so it just shows how powerful it can be as a coach or a leader to do that.
Right. I'm curious, how has COVID and the pandemic, what impact has it had on, reskilling and working with your folks to adapt new skills? I would imagine in some respects that's changed, well, it's definitely changed us and made us adapt in many different ways. But can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's changed the modality. So how do we actually reach people? And also the content that we need to deliver. So again, we focus a lot on managers, and it's never been a harder time to be a manager right now. You've got to do it remotely. You've got to do your day job, which is drive performance and engagement. But you've also got to handle all of the issues that are happening in people's lives, whether that's mental health, physical health concerns. There are important conversations about social and racial justice that you need to be prepared to take part in. And so it's a really difficult job. When the pandemic first started, we thought that remote management was going to be the thing. And so we built a bunch of content in that. That was pretty good, but as a point solution, it didn't work so well. What we realized we had to do was actually take our entire manager curriculum and rewrite it for the kind of post-pandemic times where every one-on-one can either be in person or remote, or how do you manage a meeting when it's remote and you want to make it feel inclusive to people? So it just pervades everything, and that's how we responded to just the permanent and fundamental shift to what training has to do now.
Yeah, we did the same. So Michael, as most of you know, we went through a very long, probably about 5 or 6 years of some very significant culture change, which is still evolving, right? It's never finished. But as part of that, most of our learning was face-to-face, because that is the best way to do that type of a culture evolution. And so when the pandemic hit, we didn't have much of our learning available in any other format. And so we very, very quickly had to decide, most importantly, what were the highest priority learning needs of the organization during that time. And then could those be addressed in some sort of a virtual way? There were certain programs for managers in particular that we did not offer during the pandemic because they were uniquely suited to a face-to-face experience. And so we optimized those that we could in virtual. But now with the impact of COVID and all things COVID on the talent just play out there, right? We're really very focused on the skill side, right? Based on the talent that we have, how do we identify the skills of that talent group so that we can best align the skills with the work that needs to be done? And so I also think it's going to start to shift the way we think about, like, what is it that people really need to learn, and what skills do they really need to optimize or perfect or acquire, versus in the quote-unquote old days where it was really more about the job, right? And how do you skill somebody comprehensively across a job spectrum? I think we're going to take the opportunity to be much more focused on unique skills. So,
How did racial justice impact things, particularly in the wake of George Floyd and the racial reckoning in the country? It seems to me that you might have had an opportunity for some learning moments and some reskilling of maybe the people that you work with and those types of things. And hearing from your employees as to how they really felt about not just their jobs, but our lives.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit?
I think, oh, thank you. I think for the foundation, it was exactly the same as everyone else here. It was an absolute shock to the system, and also a very, in many ways, very frustrating for many of our colleagues as well, to say, we're glad that you finally realize what we've been, trying to tell you for the past, 400 years. But what it did, and then the Asian American hate crimes that followed soon afterwards, it did shock the system to the extent to say, maybe we should stop talking and start listening and not putting the burden on certain populations to answer all of our questions. So we held listening sessions, for example, where we had breakout groups that were based on like ethnicity or race. So people had a safe, what we called sacred space to share their feelings, their truth, their beliefs, their actions. But then when we came back into the plenary, every group was asked to sort of report back on their learning, except for the group that, whether it was through Asian Americans or with our African American or Black colleagues, were like, you don't have to educate us. We're the ones who are reflecting and thinking about what it means for us. So that's an example of us trying to do more active listening by not putting the burden on one group or one population to respond to all questions, but actually trying to hear what's been going on for a long time and digging deep within ourselves to reflect on what that means about our place and position in the situation.
Yeah, I think another thing that I think this whole awakening did is show us that our DEI efforts maybe aren't as great as we might think they are, right? I think oftentimes we say, oh, DEI is getting the right people in the room and then giving those people a voice and then making sure that they're able to make impact in an organization. But it's also about bringing that whole person into work, right? Not just making sure I have X number of which color and X number of female and male in my organization, which often tends to be the way that we measure inclusion at least, or diversity at least, not inclusion maybe, but so how do we then deepen that conversation and make sure that when we, just like the pandemic did, where we are now seen as whole people, right? We are juggling lives, children at home, pets, Zooms failing. So we're juggling all of that, in a post-pandemic world. Well, in a world of like social awakening and equity, how do we really deal with people's entire personalities at work, right? How do I be my whole self at my job? And it's things we've heard about. These are topics we've talked about for many years, but I think it's actually not happened until now. And this is why we're seeing some of this as an undercurrent that's kind of being forced to be, shown to us, which is because we don't actually share our honest opinions about a lot of things. I mean, politics, religion, and I think it's taxes are not supposed to be discussed at work. So, I mean, how can you bring your whole self to work if you can't talk about your faith or your family or your social upbringing? So I think it's really about building human bonds, not coworker bonds, right? How do I be a human being at work and connect with another human being at work who I see every day and probably spend a lot more time with than I do anybody else. I mean, most of our time in our working lives are spent with our coworkers, more on a weekly basis than maybe even our own families. And so it's really about authenticity, I think, and it's really about bringing the genuine human connection and human spirit to work, and being able to speak from that place of honesty and authenticity, and not being afraid to share what I feel and believe, while being respectful that somebody else might disagree with me and not share that space with me. So I think a lot of that goes back into how we think about learning, how we think about development, human development, or how we think about inclusion. And when we build programs for organizations, I think we have to be mindful that we are humans, not workers in a machine world.
Karen.
Yeah, the item that I would add is that to Sonia's point, we've done at Microsoft many of the similar activities and the listening, et cetera, that she was referencing. But additionally, Satya made a very public commitment on Microsoft's behalf that we would help the broader community also think about and get better at this together. And so we put on an event, for those of you that may or may not have seen it, it was called Include. And we had some of the foremost experts in the world having conversations about all of these subjects and how could we all think about and lean in and do better with each other. And so it's publicly available if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the content. It's really, really well done. And again, it was to inspire a conversation for all of us to have with each other, right? This isn't just an inside Microsoft problem or an inside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's an opportunity for all of us, but we have to work on it together. And so that was a start, and I think you'll see.
Where is it publicly available?
Out on just search for it on Microsoft Include.
Okay.
You'll find content out there.
Type in Include. Okay, Tom.
Yeah, just quickly to add, I mean, I think 2022 is going to be a real year of reckoning to see how sustained companies make their diversity, equity, and inclusion spend. Like 2020, that summer with George Floyd, like no business leader could seriously consider not doing something in DEI, and we saw budgets sustain in 2021 when they came to the next budgeting cycle. There's a lot of money spent on that. But really now this year, let's see, because it's kind of out of the news, a lot of people are talking about the economy and inflation, who's really committed to that? And how can we, as learning advocates, advocate for continuing that spend? Because one-off trainings are not how you change behavior and attitudes. You need to maintain that and sustain that for years, just given the work that needs to be done. So I would encourage everyone to find ways to reach their leadership and encourage them to keep those budgets, because it's such important work that we need to keep going.
Yeah.
Any last words you guys want to add here? Oh my God, you're kidding me. Well, give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Nice job.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I'll go get tested now. All right.
The real reason we're all here.
Okay.